At my grandson's graduation, my daughter pulled me aside before the ceremony had even begun, placed 2 fingers lightly around my elbow as if she were helping a confused old man cross a street, and whispered, "Please don't embarrass us today." She said it with a smile on her face because there were other parents close enough to see her mouth move, but not close enough to hear the sentence. That was how my daughter had learned to hurt me after she married Paxton Reedley. She never did it loudly when strangers were around. She never gave people the satisfaction of seeing cruelty in its raw form. She wrapped it in concern, tucked it behind polished teeth, lowered her voice, and let the wound appear only where she knew it would land. I looked down at my old brown jacket, the same heavy canvas jacket my late wife Vera had mended by hand more than once, and I understood exactly what Brielle meant. The jacket looked old. The cuffs were worn soft. The left sleeve still carried a patch where Vera had used thread that did not quite match, because she had said matching thread was less important than honest repair. My cane made me look slower than the other grandfathers walking into Maple Ridge High that afternoon. My shoes were clean but not new. My hands had the permanent stiffness of decades spent turning wrenches in cold garages. In the polished reflection of the glass trophy case beside us, I could see Paxton's parents already moving toward the front rows in tailored coats, his father with silver hair and lawyer posture, his mother holding a handbag that probably cost more than the engine I had rebuilt in my truck the previous spring. They looked like people who had never once stood in a repair shop, wondering whether a $900 car repair meant postponing groceries or skipping medicine. Then Paxton himself leaned in from behind Brielle, smiling as if he were joining a family joke, and said, "Just stay quiet, Mateo. This is Rowan's day." He said my name without any title, without father, without grandpa, without even the courtesy of warmth. Mateo, a man reduced to 2 syllables in the mouth of another man who believed money had made him taller. I did not answer him. That is something people misunderstand about quiet older men. They think silence means surrender. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means a man is too tired to defend the same wound for the 100th time. Sometimes it means he has spent so many years protecting a child from conflict that he forgets the child is now an adult choosing to watch him shrink. I looked at Brielle first, because Paxton was not the one who had the power to truly humiliate me. My daughter did. Brielle's eyes flicked toward the gym doors, toward the families gathering beneath the blue and silver banners, toward the row of reserved seats near the stage where Paxton's people had already arranged themselves into a photograph before the camera arrived. "Dad," she said quietly, and that single word almost sounded pleading. "Please, not today." Not today meant do not tell stories. Not today meant do not limp too slowly in the aisle. Not today meant do not speak to donors, board members, Paxton's business friends, or the parents from Rowan's advanced placement classes who had never seen me picking him up after school when his mother was too busy and his father was too important. Not today meant do not be visible. So I sat in the back of the gym with the folded card for my grandson in the inside pocket of Vera's jacket, beside an $8 bouquet of blue flowers and a small wrapped box containing the old school bus transportation badge I had worn for most of my working life. I had helped raise Rowan after school. I had picked him up when Brielle had late meetings, and Paxton had client dinners that seemed to multiply whenever parenting required inconvenience. I had paid for tutoring when algebra began frightening him so badly he stopped eating breakfast before tests. I had bought his first graphing calculator, his winter boots the year his feet grew 2 sizes in 3 months, the repair on his trumpet when Brielle said the school music program was not essential enough to justify the cost, and the emergency application fee for a summer science program Paxton later mentioned proudly at a dinner as if his family had planned it all along. Nobody in that room knew any of that. Nobody knew because Vera had taught me that kindness should never be an invoice. But that afternoon, sitting in the back of the gym while my daughter's family arranged itself at the front, I felt less like a grandfather and more like a stain they had not managed to scrub out of the family picture. My name is Mateo Damian. I am 73 years old. I was born in Michigan and raised by parents who came down from Ontario with 2 winter coats, 3 cooking pots, a dented crucifix my mother kept wrapped in a dish towel, and the kind of pride poor people carry because nobody can repossess it. My father worked steel shipments near the river and came home smelling like oil, cold weather, and tobacco from other men's cigarettes. My mother cleaned offices after dark and washed her hands so often they cracked open every winter. They never taught me how to be impressive. They taught me how to arrive early, work until the job was finished, pay what you owed, and never make a hungry child feel noticed for being hungry. Those lessons do not look elegant on paper. They do not fit well into Paxton's world of donor visibility, strategic alignment, and legacy positioning. But those lessons kept me alive, kept me useful, and later helped me love my grandson in the only language I fully trusted, which was showing up. For most of my life, I worked around school buses in Kalamazoo. I repaired brakes before sunrise, checked tires in January cold, changed belts with numb fingers, crawled under chassis with salt melting into the cracks of my knuckles, drove substitute routes when another driver got sick, and learned the private geography of children's lives from the things they forgot behind them. A lunchbox shaped like a turtle belonged to a boy on Garland Street who hated tuna unless his mother cut the sandwich diagonally. A blue clarinet case belonged to a freshman whose father yelled so loudly in the driveway that I started returning the instrument to the front office instead. A spelling folder with stickers on the cover belonged to a girl who pretended not to care when she got perfect scores, but always pressed her face to the bus window on Fridays looking for someone who never came. People talk about school like it happens in classrooms. It does not. It happens in buses, hallways, lunch lines, nurses' offices, parking lots, and quiet corners where adults either notice children or fail them. My wife Vera noticed children better than anyone I ever knew. She worked in the Maple Ridge High Library, and she believed quiet children were not empty. They were usually carrying something too heavy to say out loud. Vera had soft hands but not weak ones. She could repair a torn book spine, calm a crying freshman, and stare down a rude parent without raising her voice. I met her in 1978 when I brought a box of repaired heater parts to the school office, my jacket wet from sleet, my face blackened with diesel dust, and she looked me up and down from behind the library counter and asked why I looked like I had been negotiating peace between two angry bears. I told her bus 6 had opinions. She said all buses had opinions, and most men did too, though the buses were usually more honest about them. That was Vera. She made ordinary days feel like they had a little music hiding under them. She saw dignity in worn things, potential in frightened students, humor in breakdowns, and holiness in small acts nobody photographed. The brown jacket Brielle wanted hidden came from a winter sale in 1998. My old coat had a hole near the shoulder, and I kept saying I could get another year out of it if I avoided turning left too fast. Vera found the brown one on a clearance rack between hunting jackets and work gloves, held it up against my shoulders and said, "A man who keeps children warm on buses should probably own something warmer than stubbornness." It was never fancy. Heavy canvas, big pockets, a strong zipper, but it worked. It kept snow off my back while I repaired bus 14 during a storm that shut down half the county. It covered Rowan when he was 5 and fell asleep in my truck after tutoring, his mouth open, one mitten lost, his head against my shoulder like he still believed the world could be solved by a grandfather's coat. It held bus keys, cough drops, lunch receipts, student notes, and once a tiny toy dinosaur a second grader insisted was for emergency courage. In 2008, the left sleeve tore while I was changing a frozen belt behind the garage, and I planned to throw the jacket away. Vera took it from my hands like I had insulted an old friend. "Don't throw away something just because it did honest work," she told me. Then she stitched the sleeve herself under the kitchen light. The thread did not match perfectly. I loved that most. There is still a small uneven patch inside the cuff where her thumb pressed the fabric flat, and in the inside pocket, there is a second line of stitching she added after the seam ripped from carrying too many envelopes. I used that pocket for thank you letters from students. Vera said a man should keep proof that kindness happened, especially on days when his own family forgot. When Rowan was little, he spent many afternoons at our house because Brielle was building her career, and Paxton was always between meetings. That was the phrase he used, between meetings. It made absence sound like geography. I picked the boy up from school, made grilled cheese badly, cut apples into uneven slices, listened to him explain science projects I barely understood, and drove him to tutoring when math started scaring him. He used to run to my truck before I even parked, backpack bouncing against his shoulders, yelling, "Grandpa, did bus 14 survive today?" And I would say, "Barely, but so did I." And he would laugh like I was the funniest man alive. Children are generous that way before adults teach them embarrassment. Sometimes he would sit at our kitchen table, while Vera helped him write sentences for school. She never corrected him harshly. She would say, "Words are not soldiers, Rowan. You do not bait them into formation. You invite them to stand where they belong." He loved her for that. So did I. After Vera died in 2020, the house changed first, then my daughter. Not all at once. Grief does not always break a family quickly. Sometimes it removes one person and reveals what everyone else had been using that person to hold together. At first, Brielle called often. She brought casseroles, asked if I was eating, touched my shoulder in the kitchen, and cried into my shirt like she was still 12 years old. Then Paxton's world crept in again. Donor dinners, clinic events, school board receptions, polished family photos, people who judged shoes before sentences. Brielle began correcting little things. Dad, maybe wear something nicer next time. Dad, don't tell the bus garage story tonight. Dad, Paxton's colleagues don't need every detail. She never said she was ashamed. That would have been easier to fight. Instead, she acted like she was protecting me from myself. And I let her because fathers are dangerous when they keep explaining away their children's cruelty. We can excuse almost anything when the alternative is admitting that the person we once lifted into a crib now wants us lowered out of frame. 1 week before Rowan's graduation, Maple Ridge High called me twice. I missed both calls because I was fixing my neighbor's lawn mower and had my phone in the garage on a shelf beside a jar of old bolts. When I mentioned it to Brielle later, she waved it away while scrolling through seating arrangements for the graduation dinner. It's probably another donation request, Dad. Don't worry about it. I did not worry about it. That was another mistake. Maple Ridge was not asking for another donation. They were trying to warn me that someone had started circling Vera's name with clean hands and hungry intentions. The night before the ceremony, Brielle invited everyone to dinner at an Italian restaurant on the west side of Kalamazoo. She said it would be simple. That was the word she used. Simple. By the time I arrived, simple had been dressed up until it barely recognized itself. White tablecloths, low candles, a private room in the back, a printed menu with Rowan's name at the top in gold lettering. The hostess looked at my jacket first, then my cane, then my face, and smiled with trained politeness. I stood near the entrance holding a small wrapped box in one hand and a card in the other. The bus badge inside the box was not expensive, not impressive, not something that belonged beneath gold lettering on a private menu. But I wanted Rowan to have it before college, not because I wanted him to become a bus mechanic, but because I wanted him to remember that honest work does not become small because wealthy people stop looking at it. Brielle saw me first. Her smile tightened before her arms even opened. Dad, she said softly, you made it. She said it like I was an unexpected package that arrived dented but still technically usable. She kissed my cheek quickly, then glanced down at my jacket. Just one glance. That was all. Daughters do not understand how loudly they can wound fathers without speaking. You're wearing that, she whispered. I looked down at my sleeve, at Vera's uneven stitching near the cuff. Yes, I thought maybe you'd wear the gray coat I bought you, the one that still has the tags on it. It doesn't feel like mine. It looks nicer. To who? She did not answer. That told me enough. Across the room, Paxton stood beside his parents, laughing with Kellen Moore, a school board member and local advertising owner whose picture I had seen in newsletters for years. Kellen had the kind of haircut men buy when they want to appear accessible, without surrendering authority. Paxton waved me over, but he did not introduce me right away. That was the first thing I noticed. He introduced Brielle as our communications expert, introduced Rowan as our future Michigan State man, introduced his parents with titles, affiliations, and a story about his father's former law firm. Then he turned toward me and said, "This is Mateo, just Mateo. No father-in-law, no Rowan's grandfather, no man who had picked the boy up from school for 12 years. My name sat there alone, stripped of relation, occupation, history, and usefulness. Kellen gave me a polite smile that did not know where to land. Nice to meet you. You too, I said. Paxton added, Mateo worked with the school district, transportation side, for years. Transportation side. A clean way of saying he thinks I smelled like diesel. Brielle touched my arm quickly. Dad, your seat is right over here. She led me toward a smaller table near the service door, not separate enough to be obvious, not included enough to be accidental. There was one chair beside a stack of extra napkins, and a narrow aisle where servers passed with trays. At the main table, Rowan sat between Paxton's parents and Brielle. A place card marked Kellen Moore sat across from him. There was no card with my name. Brielle spoke before I could ask. We had to keep the seating balanced. Balanced. That word did a lot of work that night. It balanced Paxton's family into the photographs. It balanced Brielle's image in front of school people. It balanced me right out of the center of my grandson's celebration. I sat down anyway because older men learn to sit through pain if making a scene might hurt a child they love. Rowan saw me from the main table and lifted his hand. "Hi, Grandpa." His smile was real. Small but real. I started to stand, and Paxton's voice cut in smoothly. "Rowan, come here for a picture with your grandparents." I stood halfway before realizing he meant the Reedleys. His parents moved around Rowan immediately, arranging themselves beneath the wall lights while Brielle adjusted her son's collar. I sank back into my chair. The wrapped bus badge felt heavier in my hand. During dinner, Paxton talked the most. He had that talent certain confident men have, making conversation sound generous while steering every room toward himself. He spoke about college planning, legacy building, strategic philanthropy, financial structure, public-facing initiatives, and the importance of teaching young people how to leverage opportunity. Kellen nodded along like a man hearing words he already liked. Rowan glanced at me now, and then with an apology in his eyes he had not yet learned how to express. Brielle kept smiling. Her face looked expensive and tired. Then Paxton said something that made my fork stop halfway to my plate. "There's an older scholarship fund tied to the library program," he said. "Great history, meaningful origin, but honestly it could use modern management." Brielle looked at him quickly, not surprised, worried. That was different. I lowered my eyes to my plate and pretended not to listen. Kellen asked, "Is the donor active?" Paxton gave a little shrug. "Elderly, from what I understand, emotionally attached to the old structure, but families can usually help guide those conversations." Families guide conversations. People who want something rarely say take at first. They say guide. They say modernize. They say protect the legacy. Across the table, Brielle suddenly looked toward me for 1 second, and in that second I saw the girl who used to climb into my truck after school with paint on her sleeves and ask if we could stop for fries before going home. Then Paxton touched the small of her back, and the grown woman returned, careful, composed, ashamed of something she had not yet admitted to herself. After dinner, everyone gathered for photographs beneath the restaurant's brick archway. I waited with the wrapped box still in my hand. No one asked me to step in. Not after the first photo. Not after the second. Finally, Rowan glanced around and said, "Where's Grandpa?" Brielle answered too quickly. "He's right there, honey. Right there," as if being visible across the room was the same as being included. Paxton's mother laughed softly and said, "Let's get one more before the light changes." The picture was taken without me. Later, sitting alone in my old truck in the parking lot, I saw Brielle's post appear on my phone. "So proud of our classy graduate." In the photo, Rowan stood surrounded by Brielle, Paxton, the Reedleys, and Kellen Moore. My grandson looked handsome. My daughter looked polished. My son-in-law looked successful. I was nowhere in the frame. The small gift box sat unopened on the passenger seat. The card in my pocket had bent at one corner. For a while, I just watched the restaurant windows glowing warm against the dark. Then I drove home slowly with Vera's stitching rubbing against my wrist every time I turned the wheel. Back in my kitchen, I opened the tin box where Vera kept old school papers, scholarship receipts, student letters, and notes she had insisted should be saved even if nobody ever asked for them. I do not know what I expected to find. Maybe comfort, maybe proof I had not imagined Paxton's words. Near the bottom, under a stack of thank you notes from students who had never known our names, I found a copy of an old document I had not looked at in years. At the top it read Vera Damien Quiet Hands Scholarship, anonymous donor terms. I sat down slowly because suddenly Paxton's dinner conversation did not sound like networking anymore. It sounded like a man circling something he did not yet know belonged to me. I barely slept that night, not because of the restaurant, not because of the picture without me. At my age, humiliation settles differently. It does not explode anymore. It sinks slow and heavy, like snow sliding off a roof in the dark. What kept me awake was the way Paxton had said modern management. Not curious, not respectful, calculated. Around 5 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and made coffee in Vera's old blue kettle. The kitchen still carried traces of her no matter how many winters passed. Cinnamon tea in the cabinet, library sticky notes in drawers, a faded grocery list taped near the microwave from 2019, because I had never had the strength to remove it. People think grief lives all at once. It does not. It rearranges the furniture inside you. I sat at the table with the old scholarship documents spread beneath the yellow kitchen light. Vera Damien Quiet Hands Scholarship. Anonymous donor terms. The words looked smaller than I remembered. Back in 2015, Vera and I never planned to create anything large. The first student we helped was a sophomore named Eli Mercer. No relation to anyone important, just a skinny kid who stopped coming to tutoring because he could not afford the late activity bus. Vera came home crying that evening. Not dramatic crying, quiet crying, the kind that hurts more because it sounds embarrassed to exist. He is missing opportunities because of $23 a week, Mateo. 23, that was all. $23. Meanwhile, the district spent thousands repainting hallways nobody noticed. So we started helping quietly. A bus pass here, a used trumpet repair there, exam fees, graduation shoes, library meal cards. Nothing flashy. Vera refused to let students know our names. Children deserve dignity, not gratitude debt, she used to say. That morning I opened the tin box again and found one of the old letters folded inside the jacket pocket Vera had repaired years earlier. Thank you for helping me stay in band. No signature, just shaky handwriting. I rubbed my thumb over the paper for a while, then my phone rang. Maple Ridge High School again. This time I answered. Mr. Damien, a woman asked, her voice older, steady. This is him. This is Hattie Burns from the front office. I remembered her immediately. Hattie had worked at Maple Ridge almost as long as Vera. She knew every student, every teacher divorce, every parent who lied about missing forms, every administrator who thought a new title meant wisdom. School secretaries run America more than politicians do. People just do not admit it. Morning, Hattie. You should have called us back sooner. Something in her tone made me sit straighter. Is something wrong? A pause. Papers shuffling. I think someone is asking questions about Vera's scholarship who should not be. My fingers tightened around the coffee mug. What kind of questions? The kind rich men ask when they are trying to rename something. Outside my kitchen window, snow melt dripped from the gutters one drop at a time. I suddenly heard every single one. Hattie, what exactly does Paxton think he is modernizing? I do not know yet, she admitted, but he came by 2 weeks ago asking whether the original donor was still actively involved. And what did you tell him? I told him donor records are not casual conversation. Good. That sounded like Vera's kind of woman. Hattie hesitated again. Mr. Damien, are you planning to attend graduation? I almost laughed. Attend? My grandson was graduating. I had watched that boy struggle through algebra, break his wrist sophomore year, survive heartbreak junior year, and stay up half the night writing essays at my kitchen table. Of course, I was attending, but the ceremony suddenly felt different. Not just a graduation anymore. A room where people were quietly moving pieces around while pretending it was only about celebration. I'll be there, I said. Good, more silence. Then Hattie added softly, bring your jacket. I frowned. My jacket. The brown one Vera always liked. For the first time that morning, a cold feeling moved through my chest. Hattie, why would that matter? You'll understand when you see the graduation program. The line clicked dead before I could ask anything else. An hour later, I arrived at Maple Ridge early to pick up Rowan's reserved seating ticket from the office. The school smelled exactly the same. Floor polish, old lockers, printer ink, gym air, and the faint metallic scent of drinking fountains that had survived more teenagers than anyone could count. Time passes differently inside schools. Every hallway carries pieces of children who already grew old somewhere else. Near the entrance stood a folding table stacked with graduation programs. I picked one up absent-mindedly, then froze halfway down the inside page. Beneath the section titled Special Recognitions were the words Vera Damien Quiet Hands Scholarship. 9 years of student support. My throat tightened immediately because Vera's name had never appeared publicly before. Never. Beneath the title was one sentence that made my stomach drop. Presented in partnership with the Maple Ridge Educational Legacy Initiative. I stared at those last 3 words for a very long time. Educational Legacy Initiative. That sounded exactly like Paxton. Clean, professional, dangerous. Then I heard Brielle's voice behind me. Dad, why are you looking at that? I turned slowly and the expression on my daughter's face told me she already knew something was about to happen. Brielle's face changed the second she saw the graduation program in my hands. Not panic, something quieter. The look people get when a lie they hoped would stay organized suddenly starts breathing on its own. She walked toward me quickly and lowered her voice before anyone nearby could hear. Dad, you weren't supposed to see that yet. Yet, I folded the program carefully. See what? The scholarship section. I watched her eyes instead of her words. Parents learn that trick early. Children stop telling the truth with their mouths long before they stop telling it with their faces. Why is Vera's name printed publicly this year? Brielle crossed her arms. It's just part of a new school initiative. There's that word again. She sighed immediately, already irritated that I was making something inconvenient instead of simple. Dad, not everything is suspicious. No, I said quietly, only the things people start hiding. A teacher passed us carrying rolled-up banners for the ceremony. Brielle waited until he disappeared down the hallway before speaking again. Paxton's been helping the school organize donor visibility. That's all. Donor visibility. I looked back down at the program. Funny how wealthy people rename things when they want ownership to sound generous. She stiffened. That is not fair. When did this start? A few months ago. And nobody mentioned it to me. Brielle hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than if she had lied smoothly. Dad, you haven't exactly wanted to be involved in public things since Mom died. There it was, not cruel enough to sound cruel. That is how family damage usually works. It arrives wearing concern. I nodded slowly, so Paxton stepped in for me. That's not what I said, but it is what happened. Across the lobby, Rowan appeared near the auditorium doors, wearing his Navy graduation gown halfway zipped. The second he saw me, his face brightened. Grandpa, he came over fast and hugged me before Brielle could reposition the moment. You came early. Wanted to make sure they hadn't graduated you without permission. He laughed, same laugh from when he was little. For 1 second, everything felt normal again. Then Paxton entered the lobby beside Kellen Moore. Both men stopped briefly when they noticed the program in my hand. Tiny moment, easy to miss, but I saw it. Paxton recovered first. Mateo, he said warmly, good to see you. Warm men are sometimes the coldest ones in private. Kellen shook my hand again, though this time he looked less comfortable. Big day. For Rowan, I answered. Paxton smiled. And for the school too. We're trying to bring some new energy into community partnerships. Community partnerships, another phrase dressed to hide fingerprints. I asked lightly, does Vera's scholarship need new energy? Paxton chuckled as if we were discussing whether. No, it's just about making sure these programs survive long-term. Survive. Interesting word. The scholarship had survived 9 years already without him. Before I could answer, Hattie Burns appeared from the office hallway, carrying a stack of folders against her chest. She stopped the moment she saw us grouped together. Hattie was in her 60s, silver hair pinned back, reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of expression school secretaries develop after decades of watching adults behave worse than teenagers. Mr. Damien, she said immediately. Could I borrow you for a moment? Paxton answered before I could. We were actually discussing the initiative. Hattie did not even look at him. I wasn't asking you. I almost smiled. She led me into the front office, where old attendance binders still lined the shelves. The room smelled like coffee, printer toner, and dust warmed by old heaters. Hattie shut the door behind us, then exhaled slowly. That man talks like a brochure. Which man? You know which one. I sat across from her desk. Hattie, tell me plainly. She studied me before opening one of the folders. Inside were printed emails, not donor agreements, not legal filings, just enough to show direction. Paxton had been emailing Kellen Moore for weeks. Subject lines included legacy transition concepts, community branding opportunities, scholarship visibility expansion, donor stewardship review. I felt tired just reading them. Hattie slid 1 page closer. Paxton had written, older scholarship structures often struggle because original donors resist modernization. Beneath that was another line. Family members can help guide emotional conversations toward sustainable outcomes. I stared at the page. Family members, meaning Brielle. Hattie removed her glasses. Mr. Damien, I don't think Paxton knows the full donor structure yet. Then what does he know? That Vera helped start it, that money came through your household, that the board thinks there may be larger expansion opportunities. I leaned back slowly. Expansion, modernization, visibility, all these expensive words circling around children who had once only needed bus fare, winter boots, and exam fees. When did schools start sounding like marketing firms? Hattie snorted softly. Around the same time, rich parents started treating gymnasiums like networking events. She handed me another paper. This one showed a draft proposal title, Quiet Hands Educational Legacy Program. Vera's name gone completely, just erased, like the woman who spent 20 years quietly helping frightened children deserved to become a slogan with cleaner branding. My chest tightened so sharply I had to look away. Hattie noticed. She would not have liked this. No, I said. She would not. Outside the office window, I could hear graduation rehearsals beginning in the gym. Folding chairs scraping the floor. Teachers calling names alphabetically. A trumpet warming up badly. Somewhere down the hall life moved forward, while old things got rewritten behind closed doors. Hattie lowered her voice. Principal Vale wanted to tell you herself before the ceremony. Tell me what? That some people on the board think the scholarship should become more public-facing. There it was again, public-facing, as if kindness only mattered once photographed properly. I rubbed the inside cuff of my jacket, where Vera had sewn the fabric years ago. The uneven stitching pressed against my thumb, steadying me. Hattie watched the gesture quietly. She loved that coat, she said. She said it remembered things. What kind of things? The people nobody else noticed. Hattie opened the final folder. Inside was a printed email from Paxton to Kellen Moore, sent 3 nights earlier. One sentence had been highlighted. If the donor is emotionally attached to the original structure, his daughter may be able to influence him privately. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I did not understand it, because I did. Paxton was not trying to help the scholarship. He was trying to reach it through Brielle. And suddenly, every embarrassed glance my daughter had given my jacket no longer felt accidental. It felt useful. Hattie leaned forward carefully. Mr. Damien, before this day is over, Principal Vale is going to call your name for a reason. I looked toward the gym doors beyond the office window, toward the ceremony, toward my grandson, toward the family already trying to rearrange the truth before the applause even started. Then Hattie said the sentence I could not stop hearing for the rest of the morning. Some people are ashamed of old coats until they realize what's hidden in the pockets. After I left Hattie's office, I walked the long hallway beside the gym instead of going straight inside. I needed air, not fresh air exactly. Space, distance from polished voices and carefully chosen words. The school looked different during graduation season. Teachers moved faster. Parents smiled harder. Students pretended not to be scared. Blue and silver streamers hung above trophy cases. Folding chairs covered the basketball court in rows, so precise they looked military. Someone in the band room kept playing the same trumpet scale and missing the top note every time. Real life always leaks through ceremony. Eventually, I stopped near the old transportation garage behind the school. Most people never paid attention to that part of campus. It sat behind the gym like something the school was slightly embarrassed to admit it needed. But I loved that garage once. Still did, in a painful way. That building held half my life. Old Bus 14 sat near the fence, with faded district lettering peeling from the side. I had not driven it since before my knee got bad, but I could still hear the sound its heater made in winter, a deep rattling cough before warm air finally pushed through. I walked over and rested my hand against the hood. Cold metal, old friend, you still smell like bad decisions, I muttered. Talking to buses now. I turned. Nora Bly stood near the side entrance carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffees balanced carefully in her hands. Nora had taught English at Maple Ridge for almost 30 years before retiring. She and Vera used to stay late together during exam weeks, grading papers while arguing over mystery novels and cafeteria pie. Only the honest buses, I answered. She laughed softly and handed me one of the coffees. She looked at my jacket immediately, not judgmental. Remembering, Vera loved that thing. She repaired it more than once. She repaired you more than once too. That landed quietly. Nora leaned against the fence beside me. She would hate what is happening inside. You know about that. This town runs on whispers and school employees, Mateo. Of course I know. The wind pushed loose grit along the pavement in thin, pale lines. Nora took a careful sip before speaking again. Paxton has been charming the board for months. For the scholarship. For the image attached to it. There was the difference, important difference. Children mattered to Vera. Image mattered to Paxton. Nora continued. People like him do not usually understand quiet generosity. They think if kindness is not branded properly, it is being wasted. I almost smiled. Sounds exhausting. It is. She nudged my arm lightly. But dangerous too. A maintenance worker rolled a ladder through the side hallway nearby. Graduation music drifted faintly through the gym wall. Life continued while conversations sharpened underneath it. Nora lowered her voice. He wants to turn the scholarship into a flagship community initiative. Flagship, I repeated. That was the word he used at the planning luncheon. I rubbed my jaw slowly. Every phrase sounded like it had been washed in expensive soap before entering the room. Legacy initiative, community visibility, modern donor structure, flagship. Not one sentence about frightened students trying to afford exam fees. Not one. Nora studied my face. You're angry. No, I said automatically. Yes, you are. I looked back at bus 14, at the rust near the wheel well, at the cracked mirror I used to mean to replace. When Vera died, I promised myself I wouldn't become a bitter old man. That is not what this is. Then what is it? Nora answered without hesitation. You built something quietly. Now someone wants to wear it publicly. That sentence sat between us a while. The worst part was she was right. It was not entirely about the money. The scholarship was never enormous. Some years Vera and I barely managed the extra support ourselves. One winter we postponed replacing our washing machine because a student needed emergency housing assistance after his mother got evicted. Vera said plain clothes could wait. Kids should not have to panic alone. She told me that was how she measured wealth, not by what stayed in your house, but by what left it. My phone buzzed suddenly. Rowan, you here already? I smiled before answering. Always. Old people arrive early so we can complain about parking. 3 dots appeared immediately. Grandpa, sorry about dinner last night. The smile faded a little before I could reply. Another message came. Dad says the scholarship stuff might get weird today. I don't know what that means. I stared at the screen. There it was again. Scholarship, not hidden anymore. Whatever Paxton was planning had already reached Rowan. And I hated that most of all. Children should never feel tension wrapped around gifts meant to help them. Nora noticed my expression. What happened? Rowan knows something is wrong. That boy loves you. I know. Then trust that. I nodded slowly, but trust becomes complicated once shame enters a family, especially inherited shame. The kind that teaches children to measure human value by appearances before they are old enough to understand sacrifice. Footsteps approached across the pavement. Paxton, even from a distance, he moved like a man used to rooms opening for him automatically. Perfect coat, polished shoes, phone in one hand. He smiled the second he saw Nora and me together. There you are, he called. Funny phrase. Not hello, not how are you. There you are, like I had wandered off from somewhere supervised. Paxton stopped beside us and adjusted his cuff. Principal Vale is looking for family members before the ceremony. Family members, I said. Interesting choice now. Nora excused herself almost immediately, but before leaving she squeezed my shoulder once. Quick and quiet, a reminder. Paxton waited until she disappeared before speaking. She's protective of old systems. People usually protect things they respect. He gave a patient smile. Mateo, nobody is trying to erase Vera. I almost asked why he had removed her name from the draft proposal, but instead I said, what exactly are you trying to build? A future. For who? For the students, for the school, for the community. Everything sounded noble when spoken slowly enough. Paxton slipped his hands into his coat pockets. The Quiet Hands Fund has potential beyond small private donations. Small private donations, I repeated. 27 students helped. Bus passes, tutoring, graduation fees, laptop repairs. Small. His jaw tightened for half a second, barely noticeable. Then the polished expression returned. Legacy programs survive by evolving. No, I said quietly. Some survive because the wrong people never touch them. Real silence. This time, even the wind seemed to stop moving for a moment. Paxton smiled again, but it no longer reached his eyes. Brielle worries about you, you know. That caught me off guard. She thinks public conflict would be hard on Rowan. There it was, the pressure point. Not anger, not shouting. Concern weaponized as leverage. I suddenly saw the shape of the whole thing. Paxton was not planning to force anything loudly. He was counting on embarrassment, counting on Brielle wanting peace badly enough to persuade me quietly. Family guidance, emotional conversations. The phrases in the email finally sounded alive. Inside the gym, applause erupted briefly during rehearsal. Paxton glanced toward the doors. We should head in soon. I did not move, neither did he. Then he said one sentence that settled deep into my bones like cold rain. People respect stories more when they are presented professionally. Professionally, as if Vera's kindness needed a better suit before it deserved survival. Paxton walked away before I answered. I stood beside bus 14, a while longer with the coffee growing cold in my hand. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from Rowan. Grandpa, if something weird happens today, please don't leave early. I stared at the screen for a very long time. If Rowan already felt the tension pulling through the adults around him, then whatever Paxton had started was no longer staying inside board meetings and polished conversations. It had reached my grandson too. By the time the graduation ceremony began, the gymnasium was full enough to feel warm. Parents fanned themselves with programs. Cameras flashed every few seconds. Grandmothers leaned into aisles trying to wave at children who were pretending not to see them. The Maple Ridge band played too loudly. The trumpets still missed notes, and that made me feel strangely better. Perfect events usually hide ugly things underneath them. Messy ones feel more honest. I sat near the back, exactly where Brielle wanted me. Not beside the Reedleys, not beside Rowan, not beside the board members. Close enough to attend, far enough not to affect the photographs. My brown jacket rested across my knees. I kept touching the inside pocket without thinking. The stitched seam Vera, repaired years ago, pressed softly against my fingers like a pulse. Rowan sat with the graduating class near the front of the gym floor. Every few minutes he glanced backward, searching for me in the crowd. Each time I lifted my hand slightly. Each time he relaxed. Children do that when they still need to know somebody safe stayed in the room. Principal Elaine Vale stepped to the podium shortly after noon. Tall woman, gray hair, calm voice. I had always liked her because she spoke like a teacher instead of a politician. She welcomed families, thanked faculty, mentioned resilience, growth, future opportunities. The familiar phrases graduation speeches are supposed to contain. But then her tone changed slightly, subtle enough that even the restless parents stopped rustling papers. Before we recognize this year's graduates, she said, Maple Ridge High would like to honor a quiet act of service that has changed student lives here for nearly a decade. My chest tightened immediately. Across the gym, Paxton straightened in his chair. Kellen Moore folded his hands together carefully. Brielle stopped smiling. 9 years ago, after one of our students nearly left school because he could not afford transportation support, 2 members of this community chose to help quietly rather than publicly. I heard someone near me whisper, "What scholarship is this?" Another parent answered softly, "No idea." That was the point. Vera never wanted applause. Principal Vale lifted the graduation program in one hand. The Vera Damien Quiet Hand Scholarship has now supported 27 students through tutoring costs, emergency transportation, exam fees, instrument repairs, meal support, and graduation assistance. 27. Hearing the number aloud nearly broke something inside me. Not because it was huge, because it was real. 27 young people who almost slipped through cracks nobody important noticed. In the front row, Paxton's expression remained controlled, but only barely. He had expected visibility, not history, not gratitude already rooted too deeply to rebrand cleanly. Principal Vale smiled gently. For years, the donor requested anonymity, but after speaking with staff who knew Vera Damien, and after reviewing the scholarship's founding language, we believe students should understand what quiet dignity looks like. Then she looked directly toward the back rows. Toward me. "Mr. Matteo Damien, would you please stand?" The gym fell strangely still. I did not move at first. For one embarrassing second, I honestly thought she might mean another Mateo Damien somewhere else in Michigan. Then Hattie Burns appeared near the side wall and nodded once. Small motion, steady, the kind Vera would have trusted. So I stood slowly. Kane first, then Nice, then the old brown jacket. The reaction inside the gym happened in pieces. Confusion first, whispers, then recognition spreading row by row. As people turned toward the old man Brielle had hidden near the back. I saw Rowan's face immediately. Jacques, real Jacques. He looked from me to his mother, then back again. Grandpa, I saw him mouth silently. Principal Vale continued speaking while I remained standing. Many of our students never knew who paid their exam fees, who quietly repaired damaged instruments, or who covered transportation costs when families struggled. But the man standing right now did not do those things for recognition. He did them because he believed embarrassment should never decide whether a child receives opportunity. The gym erupted into applause, not polite applause, real applause. Teachers stood first, then parents, then students. Even some graduates rose halfway from their chairs, clapping toward the back rows. I could not breathe properly for a moment, not because of pride, because Vera should have been there. I kept imagining her standing beside the gym wall with that tired library smile she wore whenever students succeeded quietly. Rowan stood completely now, eyes wet, clapping harder than anyone. Across the aisle, Brielle looked pale, not angry, worse, ashamed. True shame arrives when public truth collides with private behavior. Paxton did not clap immediately. He smiled, but I could see the math happening behind his eyes. Recalculating, adapting. Men like Paxton never panic first. They strategize first. Principal Vale lifted another paper. This year alone, 6 graduating seniors received support through Quiet Hands programs. A young girl near the front stood unexpectedly. I recognized her vaguely from town. Nervous posture, thin shoulders, blue honor cords around her neck. She walked to the microphone, trembling slightly. "My name is Lena Carver," she said softly. "I almost didn't take AP chemistry because I could not pay the testing fee." The gym quieted again. I never knew who helped me. I only knew someone at this school thought I still deserved a chance. She turned toward me. "Thank you." That nearly destroyed me. Vera would have loved her immediately. The applause came again, louder and longer. This time I saw several teachers wiping tears from their faces. Near the front row, Kellen Moore leaned toward Paxton, speaking urgently. Paxton's jaw tightened. Good. For the first time all day, his polished control looked human enough to crack. Principal Vale was not finished. "There is one more reason we felt today mattered," she said carefully. "The scholarship donor agreement contains a permanent directive from its founders." My stomach shifted slightly. Founders plural, Vera and me. Not an initiative, not a branding opportunity, not a future campaign. Us. Principal Vale continued. "The scholarship must remain independent from public marketing partnerships and cannot be renamed, redirected, or absorbed into outside management structures without direct approval from the founding donor and the trust administrator." Silence hit the gym like weather. I watched Paxton go perfectly still. Not dramatic. That was what made it powerful. He suddenly understood something horrifying. The old man in the cheap jacket was not standing outside the scholarship. I was the wall protecting it. Kellen's expression changed too fast. Board members smell legal complications quicker than smoke. Brielle looked at me again, this time not with embarrassment, but with realization. Painful realization. She had suddenly remembered every small correction she had made about my coat, my stories, my hands, my voice, while standing inside a legacy built quietly by those same hands. Then Rowan did something nobody expected. He left his graduation seat right in the middle of the ceremony. Principal Vale paused, startled, as my grandson crossed the gym floor in front of everyone. Paxton whispered sharply, "Rowan," but the boy kept walking straight toward me. 18 years old, graduation gown half open, face red from crying too hard in public. When he reached me, he hugged me so tightly my cane nearly slipped. "You paid for kids to graduate," he whispered. "No," I answered softly. "Your grandmother and I just helped when we could." Rowan stepped back looking devastated. "Why didn't Mom tell me?" I glanced toward Brielle. She could not meet either of our eyes. The gym remained completely silent now, except for cameras clicking somewhere near the aisles. People were no longer watching a ceremony. They were watching a family split open under the weight of truth. Principal Vale cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Damien, Maple Ridge would like to formally thank you." I started to answer, but before I could speak, Paxton suddenly stood up, and the look on his face told me he was about to try taking control of the room back before it slipped away completely. For a moment after Paxton stood, nobody in the gym moved. Not the students, not the teachers, not even the restless little brothers kicking folding chairs near the back rows. The room felt suspended between two versions of the same story, the polished one and the true one. Paxton adjusted his jacket calmly before stepping toward the aisle microphone. That calmness bothered me more than anger would have. Men who panic can still tell the truth accidentally. Men like Paxton organize themselves first. He smiled toward Principal Vale. "This is obviously an emotional moment for everyone," he began smoothly, "and we are all grateful for what Matteo and Vera contributed over the years." Contributed, like we sponsored table decorations at a fundraiser. I felt Rowan stiffen beside me. Paxton continued, "But the educational initiative was always meant to protect the scholarship's future and expand its reach. Nobody was trying to erase anyone. It was not denial, it was reframing. The rich rarely fight facts directly. They rename them until people grow tired." Principal Vale did not answer immediately. Good administrators learn silence can expose people faster than argument. Paxton turned slightly toward the crowd. "We simply believed these opportunities could help even more students with the right structure." Polite nods moved through some parents near the front. Of course they did. On paper, expansion sounded noble. That was the danger. Bad intentions almost always arrive wearing reasonable clothes. Then Rowan spoke, not loudly but loud enough. "Then why didn't you tell me Grandpa started it?" The gym went still again. Paxton's expression shifted for half a second. "Tiny crack." He recovered quickly. "Rowan, this isn't the time." "No," Rowan answered. "I think it is." I looked at my grandson carefully. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from disappointment. That kind hurts deeper. Brielle stood abruptly from her seat. "Honey, sit down." But Rowan turned toward his mother. "You knew too." Brielle opened her mouth, closed it again. The silence answered for her. I suddenly wished Vera were there more than I had since the funeral. Not to defend me, to defend Brielle. Because Vera always understood how shame spreads quietly through people until they stop recognizing themselves. Paxton stepped closer to Rowan. "Your grandfather doesn't want conflict during graduation." Interesting. He spoke for me automatically. That told me he still believed control belonged to him. Rowan looked back at me. "Grandpa, did you really pay for kids to graduate?" I nodded once. "Sometimes. Your grandmother and I helped when schools couldn't." "How many?" 27. The number hit him hard again. 18-year-old boys still believe 27 lives sounds enormous. Honestly, maybe they are right. Paxton exhaled slowly through his nose. "We are turning a personal family matter into public theater." That sentence changed the room, because suddenly people understood something important. He cared more about optics than truth. Hattie Burns crossed her arms near the side wall like a woman already done pretending patience. Principal Vale stepped toward the microphone again. "With respect, Mr. Ridley, the school chose to recognize Mr. Damien because students deserve to understand where support came from." Paxton smiled tightly. "Support also requires sustainability." There was that word again. Sustainability. As if kindness from working people becomes unstable until wealthy people supervise it. I finally spoke quietly, but the microphone near the aisle carried my voice farther than I expected. "Funny thing about sustainability, the scholarship survived 9 years before anyone tried putting a logo on it." A few parents laughed nervously. Paxton did not. His face hardened immediately. First real emotion all day. "Good." I was getting tired of polished language. Brielle looked horrified now, not only because of Paxton, but because she realized people were starting to see the entire shape of our family dynamic. The corrections, the distancing, the embarrassment. Public shame cuts differently once witnesses exist. Principal Vale attempted to guide the ceremony forward. "Perhaps we should continue honoring our graduates." But Rowan interrupted softly. "Grandpa, why do you still wear that jacket?" The question caught everyone off guard. I looked down at the brown fabric across my arm, the repaired cuff, the worn zipper, the faded sleeve edges Vera once stitched under yellow kitchen light. Then I answered honestly, because your grandmother touched this jacket more times than anyone else alive ever touched me. The entire gym went silent, even Paxton. I continued slowly. She repaired it when I couldn't afford another one. She stuffed notes into the pocket, student letters too. Every rip in this coat reminds me we survived something. Brielle's eyes filled suddenly. There finally, the girl she used to be pushed through the woman she had trained herself to become. For 1 second I saw my daughter at 14, wearing oversized paint-stained sweaters while Vera braided her hair before school. Then the moment vanished again because shame does that too. It opens doors briefly and slams them shut when pride notices. The ceremony eventually resumed, but the room never fully settled afterward. People kept glancing toward me, toward the jacket, toward Paxton, toward Brielle. Stories had shifted places inside their heads, and once that happens publicly, families never return completely unchanged. After the diplomas were handed out, everyone flooded toward the gym floor for photographs. Phones everywhere, flowers everywhere, teachers hugging exhausted parents. I stood near the bleachers waiting for Rowan, not pushing forward, not claiming space. Old habit. Then I saw Brielle gathering Rowan and the Reedleys beneath the school banner for family photos again. No gesture toward me, no invitation, just movement organizing itself around appearances automatically. I watched quietly while photographers adjusted angles and Rowan forced exhausted smiles. Paxton placed one hand lightly on Rowan's shoulder like a campaign photo. Perfect, someone said. Perfect, the ugliest word in modern families, because perfect usually means somebody invisible paid the price for it. I started turning away. Then Rowan suddenly looked up. His eyes searched the crowd until they found me standing near the bleachers, holding the small wrapped box I still had not given him. Everything on his face changed immediately. Wait, he said. Nobody listened. Another photo started. Flash, smile, adjust. Paxton's mother straightened Rowan's collar again. The wrapped gift box felt strangely heavy in my hand. So did the bouquet of blue flowers I bought quietly that morning from a grocery store near my house. $8.90. Cheap flowers, but Rowan's favorite color when he was little. No one had noticed them once. I looked down at the bouquet, at the unopened gift, at the family picture continuing without me. Then something inside me finally gave out. Not rage, worse, exhaustion. The deep kind older people carry when they suddenly realize they have spent years trying not to inconvenience people who are already comfortable hurting them. I walked out of the gym alone. Outside, the afternoon air felt colder than before. I sat inside my truck without starting it. The blue bouquet rested untouched on the passenger seat, beside Rowan's wrapped bus badge. Inside the gym, applause and music still echoed faintly through the walls. I stared through the windshield for a long time. Then I reached into the glove compartment and found the old flash drive Vera recorded messages onto during her cancer treatments. I had not played them in almost 2 years. My hands shook slightly pressing the button. Static crackled first. Then Vera's voice filled the truck softly. Mateo, if you are listening to this, it probably means you are trying to disappear again. I closed my eyes immediately. Outside the windshield, graduation families were still taking pictures. Inside the truck, my dead wife was about to tell me something I desperately needed to hear. Vera's voice always sounded calmer on recordings than it did in real life. In life, she interrupted herself, laughed at the wrong moments, lost her place halfway through stories because she noticed birds outside windows. But on those recordings, her voice carried the softness people discover only after accepting they may not have much time left. Static crackled once more through the truck speakers. Then she sighed gently. You always do that when people make you feel inconvenient. I know you think leaving quietly protects everyone else from discomfort, but sometimes leaving only protects the people hurting you. I lowered my head. Outside, Rowan stepped through the gym doors searching the parking lot. I watched him through the windshield but did not move yet. Vera continued, and if this has something to do with the scholarship, listen carefully. Scholarship. Even dying, she somehow saw trouble coming before I did. We created quiet hands for children who already feel invisible. Promise me nobody turns it into a performance. I pressed one trembling hand against my mouth. Outside the windshield, Rowan turned left, scanning the rows of cars. People who truly help children rarely need microphones, Mateo. A pause long enough to hurt. If someone ever tries to use our work to make themselves look important, protect the students first, not the adults. The recording clicked softly and ended. Silence filled the truck. Not empty silence, the kind packed with unfinished love. I sat staring at the steering wheel, while the blue grocery store bouquet rested beside Rowan's unopened gift. Then someone knocked gently on the passenger window. Rowan, his graduation gown hung half open, and his tie was crooked now. Good. Children should look slightly messy after emotional days. I unlocked the door. He climbed inside without speaking immediately. For a while, we just sat together listening to distant cheering from the parking lot. Finally, Rowan looked at the bouquet. You bought those for me. Blue was your favorite color when you were 6. It still is. That nearly broke me again. He picked up the wrapped box carefully. What's this? Open it. He tore the paper slowly and stared down at the old bus badge in confusion. It's your transportation badge. Retired transportation badge, I corrected. He laughed weakly through red eyes, then turned it over in his hands more carefully. The metal was scratched near the edges from years, clipped against jackets and winter coats. You kept this all these years. I wore it almost every day from 1989 until retirement. Why give it to me? I looked out toward the school. Because the world is going to introduce you to impressive people, Rowan. He stayed quiet. Some of them will have expensive shoes, perfect smiles, important titles. I glanced at the badge in his hands. But if you are lucky, once in a while, you will meet somebody who quietly keeps children safe during a snowstorm without needing applause afterward. Rowan swallowed hard. I didn't know any of this. I know. Mom didn't either. That question hurt differently because the answer was complicated. Brielle knew pieces, just not enough to understand what she was standing inside anymore. Before I could answer, another car pulled into the parking lot beside my truck. Black Lexus. Paxton, of course. He stepped out slowly, speaking to someone on the phone before ending the call and approaching the truck window. Rowan stiffened immediately. Stay here, I said softly, but Rowan shook his head. No. Interesting moment. Boys become men quietly. Usually during the first day they stop avoiding uncomfortable truth. Paxton opened the truck door carefully. Not aggressive. Controlled. Always controlled. Can we talk privately? Rowan answered before I could. About Grandpa's scholarship. Paxton's jaw tightened slightly. It's more complicated than that. No, Rowan said. I think it is less complicated than you want it to sound. Good kid. Paxton exhaled slowly, then looked at me. Mateo, Kellen's concern today created confusion regarding future oversight. Oversight. There it was again. The language of ownership dressed like responsibility. I finally asked the question directly. How much were you planning to control? Paxton hesitated. Small mistake. Hesitation exposes ambition faster than greed. We were discussing broader community partnerships. With Vera's name removed, his eyes shifted once toward the gym. Not denial, confirmation. Rowan looked stunned. You wanted to rename Grandma's scholarship. Paxton answered too fast. We wanted something more scalable. Scalable? I almost laughed. Poor children needing bus passes had become a scalability discussion. That was modern America in one sentence. Then Paxton made his biggest mistake. He stopped talking to me like family. He started talking to me like a problem requiring negotiation. Mateo, emotionally attached founders sometimes resist growth opportunities. I stared at him. Founder, singular now, not family, not father-in-law, not Rowan's grandfather. Founder, objectified into paperwork language because paperwork language feels easier to manage. Rowan looked horrified. You sound like you're pitching a business deal. Paxton rubbed his forehead briefly. I'm trying to protect long-term viability. No, I said quietly. You're trying to place your hands on something already respected, so people confuse borrowed dignity for earned character. That landed hard. For the first time all afternoon, Paxton looked genuinely angry. Not loud angry, cold angry. Men like him rarely yell. They calculate consequences first. You think this is about ego. I think you like standing beside things that make people clap. Silence. Footsteps approached quickly across the parking lot. Brielle. She stopped beside the truck, breathing unevenly. Her mascara had smudged slightly beneath one eye. Good. Real emotion had finally survived longer than her composure. Rowan, get back inside, she said immediately. No. She looked toward me next. Dad, please don't do this today. Interesting phrase. Not please don't misunderstand. Not please forgive us. Please don't do this. As if truth itself had become the disruption. I stepped out of the truck slowly, cane pressing into pavement. The afternoon sun hit harder outside. Around us, families continued celebrating, completely unaware that our conversation was tearing open years of hidden rot. I looked at Brielle carefully. When were you going to tell me Paxton planned to remove your mother's name? Her face collapsed slightly. Not fully. Just enough. I didn't think it would happen that way. What way? The board proposal, she whispered. Proposal. So there really was one. It was not suspicion anymore. Proof. Paxton immediately stepped in. It was preliminary discussion only. But Brielle had already said too much. I watched panic move across her face as she realized it. Then Rowan asked the question nobody could avoid anymore. You know. Brielle looked at her son, then at me, then at the jacket she used to ask me not to wear in public. Suddenly my daughter started crying. Not graceful crying. Exhausted crying. The kind that comes when pretending finally costs more energy than honesty. I just wanted people to respect us, she whispered. There it was, the whole tragedy. Not greed first, shame first. Paxton stepped toward her immediately. Brielle. But she pulled away. You kept saying Dad's image made things harder, she said shakily. You kept saying donors trust polished leadership more. Rowan stared at his father in disbelief. And you believed him. Brielle covered her mouth with one hand. That answer was yes. I suddenly felt older than I had all year, because I realized my daughter had not stopped loving me. She had simply learned to value appearances more than the man who sacrificed for her. That kind of damage spread slowly, until families barely recognized themselves anymore. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something told me not to. I answered quietly. Hello. A woman's professional voice responded immediately. Mr. Damien, this is Audra Pike from the Educational Trust Office. I apologize for calling during the ceremony, but after today's events, I believe you should know a formal inquiry was submitted yesterday requesting review access to the Quiet Hands donor structure. I looked directly at Paxton. He went completely still. Audra continued. The request listed Mr. Paxton Reedley as a prospective advisory transition partner. The parking lot suddenly felt very quiet. Now it was no longer whispers, no longer assumptions. Paxton had already started trying to position himself legally around Vera's scholarship. Judging by the look on his face, he had not expected the trust office to contact me directly before the board meeting next week. Nobody spoke after Audra Pike's phone call ended. The parking lot suddenly felt too bright, too open, like every secret had been dragged into daylight all at once. Paxton looked directly at me, not embarrassed anymore. Cornered. There is a difference. Embarrassed people still think about feelings. Cornered people think about survival. Brielle wiped her face quickly and whispered, Paxton, tell me this isn't true. He answered immediately. It's not what it sounds like. That sentence should be printed on family gravestones, because it almost always sounds exactly like what it is. Rowan stared at his father like he was seeing him from very far away for the first time. You filed paperwork behind Grandpa's back. Paxton exhaled sharply. I was trying to secure the scholarship's future before Mateo became unable to manage it. Unable. That word landed harder than the others. Old people hear the future hidden inside certain words. Unable, declining, transitioning, managing capacity. The language people use right before they start taking things. I leaned against the truck door carefully. My hands still work fine, Paxton. That's not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. He opened his mouth again, but Brielle cut him off suddenly. You told me it was just advisory planning. Paxton looked at her now with visible frustration. Because that is how these things begin. There, truth slipped out without makeup. Not kindness, not preservation, control. Rowan stepped backward slowly. You were going to take Grandma's scholarship. No, Paxton snapped. I was trying to professionalize it. Professionalize. The word echoed through me strangely. I looked down at my jacket sleeve, at Vera's uneven stitching, at fabric worn thin near the cuff from years of lifting engine covers, carrying grocery bags, helping children climb icy bus steps. Professional people would have thrown that coat away years ago. Vera repaired it instead. That difference suddenly felt bigger than clothing. Audra Pike's words still rang in my ears. Prospective advisory transition partner, meaning Paxton had already imagined himself standing publicly beside Vera's legacy, while I faded quietly into the background. The old man with the cane, the emotional donor, the obstacle-needing management. I looked at Brielle again. My daughter could barely meet my eyes now. Did you know he filed the inquiry? She shook her head immediately. No, I swear I didn't. I believed her. That was the tragic part. Paxton had manipulated her too, just more elegantly. He fed her the one fear already living inside her, that ordinary people become embarrassing once richer people start watching. A group of graduates ran laughing through the parking lot nearby, throwing caps into the air. Life continuing, always continuing, even while families crack apart beside pickup trucks and faded buses. Paxton straightened his coat again, trying to regain control of the moment. Look, he said tightly, the scholarship needs stronger structure if it's going to survive long term. I finally lost patience, not loudly, calmly. That frightened him more. You keep talking about survival like Vera's memory is a business franchise. Silence. I stepped closer. For 9 years, children got help because nobody turned their struggles into a publicity campaign. Paxton's face hardened, and for 9 years, almost nobody knew the scholarship existed. Exactly. That answer hit him harder than anger would have, because men like Paxton cannot understand invisible generosity. If cameras do not see kindness, they think it disappeared. Rowan looked between us helplessly. Then he quietly asked the question that mattered most. Grandpa, were you ever going to tell me? I looked at him carefully. No. Why? Because helping people is not supposed to become a debt they owe you forever. His eyes filled immediately. God, he looked so much like Vera when he cried. Not dramatic, honest. Brielle suddenly sat down hard on the curb beside the parking lot island, covering her face with both hands. I did this, she whispered. No, I said quietly. She looked up, shocked. Yes, I did. I kept asking you to dress differently, act differently, talk differently. Her voice broke. I made you feel small. There it was, finally spoken aloud, not hidden beneath polished words anymore. I walked toward her slowly. My knee hurt with every step. Age makes forgiveness physically tiring sometimes. I know why you did it, I told her. Brielle shook her head through tears. No, you don't. Yes, I said softly. You were afraid people would judge where you came from. That hit her immediately because it was true. Paxton watched silently, realizing the room he controlled earlier no longer existed now that truth had entered it. I sat carefully beside Brielle on the curb. My father worked steel shipments near Windsor, I said quietly. He smelled like oil and cold, weather every day of his life. Brielle listened silently. When I was 12, I used to wish he wore nicer clothes too. The confession seemed to shock her. I hated when other kids saw his lunch pail. I thought successful people looked clean all the time. I looked at my hands. Then I got older and realized clean hands often means somebody else carried the heavy things. Tears rolled down her cheeks harder now. I'm sorry, Dad. Not fixed, not healed, but real. That mattered. Behind us, Paxton finally spoke again. So what happens now? Interesting. Not how do we repair this? Not how do I apologize? What happens now? Business language even at the edge of collapse. I stood back up carefully and faced him. The afternoon wind moved lightly across the parking lot. Students shouted somewhere near the football field. A graduation balloon drifted loose into the sky. Now the scholarship stays exactly where Vera left it. Paxton folded his arms. That's emotional thinking. No, I answered. It's protective thinking. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded donor agreement copy, the old paper still carrying crease marks from years inside Vera's tin box. I handed it to him. Read the final paragraph. He scanned it quickly. His expression changed instantly. Good. He finally understood the trap he had walked into. The document stated clearly that no advisory board member, community partner, or family relation may assume oversight authority without unanimous approval from the original donor and trust administrator. Beneath that clause sat Audra Pike's signature renewal from 6 months earlier, meaning Vera and I had protected the scholarship legally long before cancer took her. Paxton looked up slowly. "You updated this recently?" "Yes. Why?" I smiled sadly. "Because Vera saw people like you coming before I did." That one finally pierced him. "Not publicly, personally. The worst wound for proud men is discovering they were predictable." Kellen Moore suddenly emerged from the school entrance hurrying toward us, clearly having heard enough rumors already. "Paxton," he called sharply, "we need to talk." The school board smile was completely gone. Now Kellen looked nervous, very nervous. He glanced at the donor agreement in Paxton's hand and immediately understood liability had entered the conversation. Board members love publicity. They hate documentation. Kellen lowered his voice urgently. The trust office contacted Principal Vale. Paxton's face darkened. "They're freezing all restructuring discussions immediately." There it was, the whole thing collapsing in real time. No dramatic explosion, no courtroom, just powerful people quietly backing away once consequences appeared. I looked toward the school gym one last time. Parents still taking photographs, teachers hugging graduates, children stepping toward futures they did not yet understand. Suddenly, I realized something important. The scholarship was never the real fight. Respect was the right of ordinary people to remain visible in a country obsessed with polished success. Rowan walked over slowly, holding the old bus badge against his chest. "Grandpa, can we take a picture together?" I looked at Brielle, at her ruined makeup, at her lowered eyes, at shame finally cracking open into something human. Then I looked at Paxton standing alone now, perfect coat, perfect shoes, nothing left protecting him except silence. For the first time all day, I realized I no longer needed revenge nearly as much as he needed consequences. We took the picture beside the old transportation garage, instead of under the polished school banner. Rowan stood on one side of me, Brielle on the other after asking quietly if she could be included. And for several seconds before the photo was taken, none of us knew where Paxton had gone. He had moved away with Kellen, toward the side entrance, where men in expensive coats speak softly when they are trying to keep public failure from becoming written record. Hattie took the picture on Rowan's phone. Nora stood behind her with her hand over her mouth. Bus 14 sat in the background, faded and ugly and honest. I wore the brown jacket. Rowan held the old transportation badge in one hand, and the blue bouquet in the other. Brielle's face was not polished. Her mascara had run. Her smile was not ready for posting. It was the first photograph of my family in years that looked truthful. But truth does not heal everything. People say it does because they want pain to have a clean purpose. Truth only changes the structure. It shows where the rot was. After that, people still have to decide whether they can live inside the damaged house or tear half of it down. 3 months after Rowan's graduation, summer settled over Kalamazoo slowly, the kind of summer where old men sit outside hardware stores drinking weak coffee, while teenagers pretend they invented loud music. Life looked normal again from the outside. That is another trick Payne plays. The lawns grow, the buses run, the grocery store changes its seasonal display. People stop asking how you are, not because they know the answer, but because they grow uncomfortable around stories that do not resolve quickly. The school board quietly cancelled every discussion connected to Paxton's legacy initiative 2 weeks after graduation. Kellen Moore resigned from the advisory committee shortly afterward. No scandal, no dramatic newspaper headline, just careful distance. That is how respectable people usually run when accountability appears. The Vera Damien Quiet Hands Scholarship remained exactly where Vera left it. Quiet, independent, protective. Audra Pike helped me establish an additional fund later that summer called the Vera Damien Trade Path Grant, focused on transportation certifications, skilled trades, and technical education students who got overlooked, while everyone else chased prestigious college headlines. Vera would have loved that. Children who work with their hands deserve dignity too. As for Paxton, he never really apologized. Not honestly. He sent long emails about misunderstanding intentions, emotional overreactions, and his ongoing respect for Vera's contribution. The kind of messages written, by people trying to sound reasonable enough to escape consequences. But consequences came anyway, not revenge movie consequences, real ones. Brielle separated their finances before autumn. The school district stopped involving him in scholarship planning. The clinic foundation removed him from a donor luncheon subcommittee after someone quietly raised concerns about conflict of interest. People around town began speaking about him more carefully than admiringly. Image-based men suffer deeply once admiration becomes uncertainty. Brielle changed slowly, and that mattered more to me than a fast apology would have. Fast apologies are usually performances. Real change moves awkwardly at first. She called too much, then not enough, then honestly. She stopped asking what I planned to wear. One Saturday in October, she came to my house wearing jeans, no makeup, carrying grocery bags, and looking more like the daughter Vera raised than the polished stranger from the graduation photographs. She stood in my kitchen holding Vera's old library mug and said, "I found this in a box of Mom's things." We drank coffee together in silence for a while. Then she finally asked the question she had avoided for months. "Were you ashamed of Grandpa when you were younger?" I nodded once. "Yes." That surprised her. "I thought successful people needed to look impressive," I admitted. "It took me years to understand character usually arrives wearing work clothes." Brielle cried quietly after that. Not dramatic healing tears. A different kind. The kind that knows forgiveness may come, but innocence will not. She eventually apologized publicly during a small scholarship dinner that winter. No excuses, no careful wording, just truth. "I spent too many years worrying whether my father looked successful," she told the room. "I should have been asking whether I looked grateful." That sentence stayed with people, including me. Rowan visits every Sunday now when classes allow it. He still keeps the old bus badge in his backpack. He says it reminds him useful people matter more than impressive ones. Smart kid. Sometimes he asks about Vera, not in the soft memorial tone adults use, but in the hungry way young people ask when they realize the dead still shape their lives. I tell him the truth, that she burned toast constantly, that she once smuggled 3 abandoned kittens into the library during a storm, that she could make a rude superintendent apologize without changing the volume of her voice, that she believed the quietest child in a room was often the one most worth listening to. The brown jacket still hangs beside my front door. Same uneven stitching, same worn cuffs, same inside pocket Vera repaired years ago. Sometimes Rowan jokes that the thing belongs in a museum. Maybe it does. Not because it is valuable, because it survived. That is different, and maybe that is the lesson I learned too late. America teaches people to admire polished lives, big houses, smooth words, professional smiles, perfect pictures under good lighting. But some of the best people you will ever meet smell like engine oil, carry old lunch coolers, wear repaired coats, and quietly help others without needing their names printed on banners. Do not wait until those people are old and tired before recognizing their worth. Do not confuse embarrassment with superiority. That mistake destroys families faster than money ever will. The truth is, Paxton looked successful the day of graduation. I looked old. One of us was trying to protect children. The other was trying to protect appearances. Eventually, everyone in that gym learned the difference. But learning the difference did not restore what had been lost. Brielle and I speak now, but there are pauses between us that were not there before. Paxton and Rowan are polite when necessary, but something clean broke between them in that parking lot and never fully returned. Rowan still loves his mother, but he watches her more carefully. The way children watch adults after discovering adults can be weak in ways that hurt other people. That is the cold part nobody tells you about public truth. It protects what needs protecting, but it also leaves witnesses behind. Children become witnesses. Parents become evidence. Families become rooms where everyone remembers who stood where when the truth arrived. Sometimes I still listen to Vera's recordings at night, usually when snow hits the windows, usually when the house feels too quiet. In the last recording she ever made, she laughed softly and said, "Mateo, promise me you won't become invisible just because the world gets distracted by louder people." I think about that sentence often now because getting older in America can feel exactly like that. People stop seeing you, stop listening, stop asking what you carried for them. But invisible people built most of the good things this country still stands on. Bus drivers, custodians, factory workers, school secretaries, mechanics, library women with tired eyes and gentle hands. People like Vera, people like my father, maybe people like you too. On the first snowy morning after Rowan left for college, I drove past Maple Ridge High before sunrise. I did not need to be there. Old habits steer old trucks sometimes. The transportation garage lights were on. A young mechanic stood beside bus 14, hood open, breath rising in the cold as he fought with a stubborn belt. For a moment I thought about stopping, telling him the trick with the tensioner, showing him where the old bracket always caught wrong when the temperature dropped below 20. But I did not. He would learn, or someone else would teach him. That is how honest work survives, not through applause, but through hands passing knowledge quietly from one tired person to another. I parked across the street for a few minutes and watched students begin arriving under the weak gray light. Some came from cars with heated seats and parents carrying travel mugs. Some came walking with backpacks too heavy and coats too thin. One boy stood near the curb counting change in his palm, face tight with the familiar shame of almost not having enough. A woman from the office came outside, said something to him, and guided him in through the side door before anyone else could notice. I smiled because I knew that movement. Quiet Hands was still working. Vera was still working. Not loudly, not professionally, not under Paxton's banner, just there where children needed it. I drove home with my old brown jacket on the passenger seat instead of on my shoulders. The heater took too long to warm up. The road was slick. My knee hurt. The world had not become gentle. My daughter had not become innocent again. My grandson had grown up faster than I wanted. My wife was still gone, but the scholarship remained untouched. And somewhere inside Maple Ridge High, a child who felt invisible was going to receive help without being asked to perform gratitude for it. That was not a happy ending, not exactly. It was something colder and sturdier, a beam that held after the pretty plaster crack. By the time I reached home, the sun had risen just enough to turn the kitchen window pale. I hung the brown jacket on its hook beside the door and pressed my thumb once against the uneven cuff where Vera's thread still held. The house was quiet, not peaceful in the easy way people like to imagine. Quiet like a room after hard truth has passed through and left everything standing but changed. I made coffee in the blue kettle. I set 2 mugs on the table out of habit, then put one back in the cabinet. Some habits take longer to die than people do. I sat alone while the coffee cooled and thought about Rowan, Brielle, Paxton, Vera, the scholarship, the gym, the applause, the shame, the photograph by the bus garage, and the old badge now sitting in my grandson's backpack hundreds of miles away. I did not feel victorious. Victory is too loud a word for what remained. I felt present, visible, scarred, still standing. That had to be enough.